Welcome to the Design of AI podcast, the podcast for product teams. We interview leaders at the forefront of AI and provide in-depth analysis about the industries AI is transforming. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. And join our newsletter to get resources from our guests, plus key insights and strategies to help your business. Get it on our website, designof.ai, or Substack.
AI is supercharging what product teams are capable of. In today's episode, we have two case studies of leveraging AI to improve product team workflows. We'll learn from a designer in a financial services firm who built a chatbot to address inefficient back and forths with clients about solutions and documentation. We'll also learn from a researcher who leveraged ChatGPT to analyze large sets of qualitative data to better understand a two-sided marketplace.
While building bots and analyzing data seem tangential from one another, let's consider why bots have failed in the past. The first chatbot was made in the 1960s by MIT. It was called Eliza. It was intended to mimic human conversation, but it really lacked true understanding. So fast forward a bit more. Obviously, there were a lot more chatbots created, but they were mainly stuck in academia because they weren't really viable. Businesses couldn't really leverage them. They weren't sustainable as a replacement for people. But then let's go back to 10 years ago. That's when Siri and Google Assistant finally came out. They made significant moves in terms of creating assistants, and we really started seeing the benefits of how these automation tools can help users. They were supposed to lead to a hands-free experience and change the way people access information. The truth was, though, that they still lack comprehension in many respects, and the use of it was still limited, and people tend to use text-based interfaces more. But bots have become more ubiquitous since then, especially over the last 5 years as businesses have been trying to cut costs and improve efficiency. If I were to poll 100 people today and ask them if they were using bots and conversational agents, pretty confident they would say no. They'll say that the technology still often misinterprets the ask and the intent. But this is where generative AI products like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Llama might finally enable product teams to start delivering solutions that work.
Let's take a look at what this means for the industry and for people wanting to build generative AI-based products. In 2023, only about 20% of chatbots were integrating GenAI into their tool. But looking ahead into 2026, it's estimated that or expected that 80% of chatbots will incorporate generative AI in them. When we look at the market size of chatbots or advanced chatbots that are building with GenAI, in 2023, that was a $5.4 billion industry, expected to grow up to $9.4 billion by the end of this year. So how do we actually do this? First, we're going to be speaking with Savannah Carlin. She's a staff product designer at Marqeta, where she designs experiences for 150 plus enterprise customers. She previously worked in education and marketing technology, and she lived in New York. Today, we'll be speaking with her about how to design and launch an AI-powered bot, how to build a business case for it and prove an ROI, the challenges of conversational UX design today, and the opportunities of UX design in the future. Next, we'll be speaking with Weidan Li. He's a research lead at Seek.com, where he mentors multiple teams within the company on design research practices, advocating for and embedding research methodologies and insights across the company for strategic impact and cultural change. We'll be speaking with him about the benefits of using ChatGPT to analyze qualitative data, the downfalls of using ChatGPT to analyze qualitative data, how product teams can leverage AI to analyze unstructured data, and how improvements to AI models may benefit analysis in the future. Our two guests are both presenting at the Rosenfeld Design with AI conference on June 4th and 5th. You can attend the online conference to go through their case studies.
The key to making AI products that solve most B2B and B2C workflows is the technology's ability to interpret unstructured questions and tasks. While Savannah has been working on the front lines of designing the experience of interacting with the AI, Weidan's exploration of AI's capabilities analyzing open-ended data shines light on how successful AI will be at delivering conversations that customers will find valuable. And what he found is that the technology is great at summarizing and quantifying, but not so great at analyzing. This means that ChatGPT performed not so great at identifying hidden meanings and relationships. It means that the best strategy today is to develop bots and agents with focused intent that solve specific workflows. For example, If you were to build an agent that's specifically a copilot to improve your JavaScript coding, it likely will be much more successful than trying to build an agent that's helping someone decide what work to prioritize today and help them figure out, well, why does that matter? And what we learned from Savannah was very similar, who found that her bot was actually rather successful because it was trained on very specific questions, tasks, resources, and past conversational history that showed how the solution should be discussed and what kind of interactions a customer will likely have and send back. Her bot's realm of questions was really much more focused. And it could also enable triaging back to the human agent if it ever ran into issues.
The topic of agents and bot was on center stage this week at the OpenAI and Google product releases. Both announced significant improvements to the computational power and speed of their LLM technologies. OpenAI showed a demo of two agents negotiating in almost real time with one another. And multimodal capabilities were released, meaning that the technology could be used for a whole new range of use cases, like documenting a car accident or industrial tasks that rely on computer vision. While OpenAI, Google, Meta, and Anthropic are investing big on the tech stack, entrepreneurs and products are prioritizing solving workflows related to customer service. For example, this week Intercom, one of the biggest players in customer service tools, announced a massive investment into AI to retain their significant market share. But let's remember that compliance and regulatory bodies means that enterprise orgs will need to build their own solutions or leverage ones with very specific capabilities. That's why today's case studies will be so important. Let's hear from two product leaders working on the front lines of leveraging AI.
Hey, Lou Rosenfeld here. I'd love to tell you about a conference that we have coming up at Rosenfeld Media. It's called Designing with AI, and it takes place virtually June 4th through 5th, 2024. We're going to be doing two things at this conference. One is we're going to have 10 case studies and demos queued up to show you how UX writers, researchers, and designers are taking advantage of AI today. The other thing we're going to do is make sure we model the questions that need to be asked about how AI can be used in a way that doesn't cause harms. And so we've got some interesting panelists ranging from design ethicists to governance experts to people who specialize in labor. And they're going to be looking at the proceedings of each day and asking some tough questions. And those are the kind of questions that you may want to be able to ask in your workplace. It's all coming up at Designing with AI 2024. Again, it's going to be virtual. Hope to see you June 4th and 5th.
This Design of AI episode is brought to you by PH1 Research, an innovation research consultancy that specializes in turning business questions into product decisions. Over the last decade, PH1 has helped client teams discover, conceptualize, and test product improvements and net new ideas. This has included executive briefings about how to leverage AI and researching which specific use cases and tools your customers want. PH1 has worked on projects for Spotify, Microsoft, the National Football League, Dell, Mozilla, Bell, and various health and higher education groups. With capabilities across product discovery research, service design, rapid prototyping, and in-market testing, PH1 has been a key ally of product and product marketing teams. Visit their website to book an intro call, www.ph1.ca. Hello, and thank you for joining Savannah. She's going to be speaking at the Designing with AI conference, presenting a case study about designing interactions for AI. And I'm very excited to hear about what you've learned as a designer trying to go into this new territory of conversational design.
So to give a little bit of background on the project that I'll be presenting, Marqeta is a fintech company, and we do a lot of very enterprise, very back-end heavy things. And that means that we have a ton of APIs and a ton of documentation that really provides a ton of detail on how different engineers can use these different tools and features. And last spring, almost a year ago, ChatGPT had come out, and our team was very aware of the fact that a lot of times we would get these very simple questions from, engineers from our customer teams, and they'd be like, well, there's an article for this. Like, why can't they find this article super quickly? Like it should be right there for them. And so we realized that that could be an amazing opportunity to start using some of these more conversational chatbot type tools to help automate some of that experience of like, hey, simple question. Oh, here's your answer. And here's any of the accompanying documentation that supports it. So as a team, we came together. It was me and a technical writer and several engineers, as well as a product manager, and decided to actually build out a chatbot for our doc site. And the goal of this was really to reduce the amount of time it took for someone with a question to get that question answered using the material available on the site. And I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, like when I actually present the case study, but that was a really fascinating experience for me because it was my first time using this kind of technology. And I played around with chatbots in the past, but nothing that was really meant to create this like very deeply conversational experience. And we had some additional challenges, like we're a fintech company, so we have a ton of compliance requirements. And so the issue of like, well, what if the bot says something wrong? That was really important. And I kind of, over the course of the project, really learned a couple key things that make these experiences unique. And also, if you can get them right, can make these experiences really simple and easy and just give you that feeling of like talking to a person. It's like, oh, this was so much easier than like, kind of going back and forth, using different tools.
You said something very interesting. Chatbots have been around for a really long time. We've all gone through sort of our ups and downs with them. We've all had some form of frustration or alienation or joy, and then all circled back into itself. What have you learned is the secret to actually making a chatbot that's actually useful and enjoyable?
Yeah. So I think there's three things that really go into that. Absolutely, number one is being transparent about the limits of the tool. So not telling your users, hey, this is this bot that's just like a human being and it just knows everything in the world and it can do everything in the world. Because setting expectations that high, like everyone is always going to be disappointed. Like that's just going to happen. And so, number one, being transparent and being like, hey, like, in our situation, we were like, hey, this is a bot that answers questions about our APIs. It doesn't answer questions about like how we stack up against competitors or our overall entire industry. And that really sets people up for success because it helps them understand like, oh, here are the sort of things that I can expect from this tool. And so it really kind of realigns expectations to a more realistic kind of setting. And then I would say number two is really thinking about designing around what these cool tools currently do well, not what they might hypothetically do well in the future. And I noticed this, everyone in tech, like a lot of us get really excited about new technology. And I've had conversations with, people that they are like, oh, well, I saw this demo from OpenAI and, maybe if they keep improving things and in a year or two, we could have a tool that does this, this, and this. And it's just a million different things. And it is really cool and really exciting. But I'm sure many of us have had the experience of going to a site and kind of being forced into using a tool that seems a little bit half-baked. And I think that that's completely avoidable if you just think about like, wait, like what does this technology currently do really well? What does this technology do that we can have a lot of confidence in? And let's build around that and design around that and kind of like let that vision state, future state just kind of live in the future for now and not focus on it as much. And then I would say the last thing that's really important, and this is top of mind for me because I recently had an experience where this came up, which is that you want to focus on workflows that are already occurring via some kind of conversation. And I wouldn't say this is a hard and fast rule, but I do think it's very relevant because, for us with this Docs AI project, we noticed like we were having email threads, with these questions in them. That's a conversation, texting your company, someone calling your company, asking a question, your teammates actually talking to each other about something. Like those are conversations. That's a hint that a chat-based interface is going to be more aligned with people's current mental model for how they actually get that job done. And the flip side of that is if you try to flip things that really aren't suited to a conversation into a conversation, it can be very slow and frustrating. And I just went through this because I used a customer support bot and I was just trying to change an appointment time. And it wouldn't let me just fill in a form to put in the dates that I wanted and the range of times that I wanted. It was like, okay, for the first day that you're available, input the day in this exact format. And then I input the day. And then it would go, okay, I'm confirming. Is this the first day that you're available? And, repeat that like 7 more times. And so I think that's an example of something that probably wouldn't happen via a conversation, but then when it's kind of jammed into that format, it doesn't work as well. So yeah, be transparent, design around what it currently does well, not what it might hypothetically do well, and then focus on workflows that are already occurring via some kind of conversation.
I think it's a very important lesson in terms of when to leverage this. I've worked with a lot of tech companies that have knowledge bases. They obfuscate customer support information, and they really try to avoid email threads as much as possible. If I'm one of those organizations, how can I assess whether it's better to remain in a typical knowledge based format or move over to some sort of conversational format?
I think the question that I would look at first with that is, what is the search experience currently like? Do you have a search experience that is functional for your knowledge base? Are people using it at all? Are they selecting any of the results that they get when they actually use it? Because I think a lot of times people maybe want to use chat as a replacement for searching. And I don't think that's always the best approach. I think that chat is often more suited to combining bits of information from multiple different articles and then also summarizing them. But if that's not what really people need, when they really just need to find the specific resource, then thinking more about how do you improve your search functionality, and also how do you maybe improve the taxonomy and the structure of your information. And that's boring. That's not as fun to build. But I do think there's so much value to be had in just like, hey, we have this massive knowledge base. Let's tag everything properly. Let's think about how we've structured this and how we've organized it and grouped the information and improve that first and see how far that gets you.
A couple of years ago, there was a huge, unbelievable amount of bots that started coming out. Many of them you'll still find today on like WhatsApp or Messenger. A lot of them are meta related. And you mentioned taxonomy. The taxonomy seems really poor in those. We end up caught in closed loops. There's dead ends, etc. What's different about the technology today? What would make us believe that there'll be more successful outcomes than there were 3, 4, 5 years ago?
From my understanding today, the actual technology itself is different and is better at seeing connections and patterns across pieces of information, even when they're maybe not organized in the best way. So of course, great organization of information, that's always a plus. But for us, for our example, I wouldn't say every single piece of information that we were feeding into this model was perfectly organized and perfectly, ordered. But because of the way that this works more, I would say, is pattern matching and seeing similarities and seeing common links that exist, I think that it can kind of overcome that a bit more. And that's also kind of what human beings do. Our brains, we have connections to different things, and it may not be always perfectly structured and perfectly prioritized. And I think that's part of what makes these experiences often feel more conversational and more human.
Thinking about this new interface style, a couple of weeks ago, we had Emily Campbell on, who curates the Shape of AI newsletter. And it's a beautiful community of different AI patterns. And she said an interesting quote, which is basically working with AI is like working with a new type of material. What did you find in your experience? Was there something that you found really elevated what was possible or challenged you in a new way?
I think all of the above. I think that it's really interesting she uses material. For me, the way I kind of experienced it was almost like this just amazing increase to your working memory. A lot of designers might be familiar with Miller's Law and the idea that we can hold around 5 things in working memory at a time, plus or minus a few. And that shapes absolutely everything that we design. That constraint, it is a huge constraint, just even in how we communicate with other human beings. We have that limit. And for me, when I was thinking about this tool, it was wow, all of a sudden there are very, very few limits. I don't have to say, oh, we can only show one result at a time, or all we can do is show a list of results. We can combine pieces of information from 17 different results and synthesize them and kind of almost create something new out of what already exists. And that was the most exciting part to me. And it immediately made me think too of how I think with this, it creates a very big opportunity for designers and product managers to start to think about, what could I do? How could I personalize this experience if I didn't have to be aware and holding in mind all of the dimensions of personalization all at the same time? And that's what I'm most excited about. And that's, I guess, maybe it's sort of like a mental material to work with. But I think that's something that you should really consider is what if you are able to dramatically increase the number of things you can take into account in an experience for someone?
You brought up synthesis and the capability of synthesizing results. I mentioned that I've worked on a variety of self-service products, and what we found when doing research with that was quite often users and testers had much more confidence in Google search results because they were better synthesized than the standard search outcomes. What are some of the things that are capable in these AI search results to make them more relevant, more usable, and more applicable than traditionally had been found?
So I would say the number one thing is the user's context. And I think that what that really means is when something doesn't feel relevant to us, it's because we're in a specific context of what our goals are, what our priorities are, what we already know, what is obvious to us, and what we need in the moment. And when we are interfacing with a tool that doesn't also have that exact same context as us, it just feels like getting like very irrelevant, like talking to someone and they give you bad advice and you're like, well, that was like I didn't even need that, like that's not super helpful to me. So I think that that's a really key part to take into consideration. I think also shows the need for design in these experiences, because we have to be the curators that really deeply understand what is the context of the users who are coming to this tool and maybe seeing these search results. What is the most important to them? How will we understand that in advance? How can we maybe build a sort of profile of this person to deeply kind of capture that context and then create results that actually meet it and are relevant to it, rather than having a kind of less personalized, more just like one size fits all kind of approach where it's like, well, a lot of people clicked on this when they use that search term, so we're going to go with it and that's it.
You hinted at the responsibility of the designer, and this is something that's very interesting right now because a lot of designers are feeling a little unsettled and a little threatened by AI. But you also hinted that you should be responsible for the quality of results. What do you see as the new kind of domains and the new possibilities for what a designer can and how they can impact with AI as a material?
Oh, I love this question because I feel like what can't you impact with this kind of material? And I think speaking to like maybe worries that people have, I do think that the actual task of generating a lot of deliverables that designers create today, like Figma mockups, like I think that will change a lot and there will be much less need for human input. There will be less need for time in that. But there's going to be a vastly increased need for the ability to conceptualize your users' context and their goals and what matters to them, and also very, very importantly, all of the information that they're trying to sift through as they try to get something done in their day. And especially I'm already seeing this, even just going on LinkedIn, it's like all of a sudden you see things and you're like, that's definitely AI generated. Like we're seeing this massive increase in content, and the content's not getting better, it's not getting more relevant. And I think that that really shows that there is an even bigger need for designers to come in and understand, like, hey, what matters to the people we're serving? What is really important to them? How do we conceptualize that experience? How do we show the rest of our team, the journey that this person is on, and then actually create something that's very useful and valuable for them? And maybe that doesn't look as much like creating a lot of Figma mockups or working as closely with a design system. Maybe it looks a lot more like prompting a tool to create those things for you. But that core task of like being that person who really understands and can think about a different future state where something is easier and more enjoyable and more valuable, I think that that's only going to get more and more needed.
Did you find it difficult to move from thinking on an interface level to thinking more from a service and systemic level? Was that something that was challenging?
Yeah, I think that that is challenging because it's a lot more to be aware of in any one moment. It's a lot easier to think about, hey, just make a simple user flow from point A to point B, and then make like basically mock-up or mock-ups for every step in that user flow. I think that one thing that was kind of an early challenge for me in this project was error states. I've only ever worked with error states that had very specific reasons, and there was a very set number of reasons that an error would be occurring. Like, hey, this service failed and we don't have the data to show you on the screen right now. But this was different because, there's an error state that could be shown for so many, like just a vast number of different reasons. It could be everything from, hey, they asked a question that like wasn't very relevant, to we just don't have any materials we can reference and we don't want to make anything up. And so actually I worked really closely with our technical writer on that process to think about like, how do we help someone actually recover from that error? Oh, there you go.
I love all these New York sounds.
You're really getting the ambiance.
I want to reference there's an article that you wrote on Medium. It was a really wonderful resource. You really went through the thought process of assessing how design has changed as a result of AI. And you highlighted the importance of trust
And trust keeps coming up, particularly in enterprise settings. There seems to be a lot of concerns, both from an employer to employee level and from just, to a client level. What happens to that data? Where does it go? B2C still hasn't really experienced this kind of like reality check in a sense of trust, because there aren't that many B2C AI products yet. What do you see as ways to deal with trust, to better communicate trust, and address it as a barrier to adoption?
So I think for this, number one, just don't lie. Don't exaggerate, don't lie, err on the side of caution. If you're not sure and you can't guarantee that someone's information is going to be 100% private, then tell them that. Set people up for success. I really feel that transparency and consistency is what creates trust. Consistently acting in a transparent way over time. That is really the kind of experience that you want to create for someone using a tool like this. So I would say, yeah, number one, and find a way to communicate that in the product. Hey, don't put really private, special information in this product, depending on what it is and you're comfortable with. I would say, like, on the question of how someone's information might be used or their files might be used, that is something I think you can really work with like a legal team around to really understand that and communicate that to people. I think in terms of how reliable the output is, it's very, very important to actually create the ability for users to fact check the output. So this is often, like, I think a mental model you might use for this is like when you're writing a research paper and you have to add your citations and your sources. So it's going to look like source links, reference links, footnotes, and you want to think about how do you create a UI that facilitates that loop of someone prompting the tool in some way, checking the output, then checking the source links for the output, and then potentially refining that prompt and checking the output again. You want to make it easy for people to go through that loop, because that's how they will actually learn the strengths and weaknesses of the tool and, for their own uses, like how reliable it is. And I think it really starts from this point of like, hey, you should fact check this output, don't take it at face value.
I can think of hundreds of organizations that could benefit from a smart conversational interface. If I was a product leader in one of those orgs, how do I make the case for it? How do I tell leadership, hey, there's this workflow that's been really underutilized and underfunded. It's time to really just figure it out finally.
I think that in that situation, it's really important to emphasize probably two things. One, the cost of this problem continuing to go unaddressed. Even if that's as simple as like, hey, we're just going to time someone doing this workflow the way that they have to do it today. And we're just going to add up that time across the organization. Let's say someone has to do something that takes 5 minutes and they have to do that 10 times a day. That's an hour of their workday that they could be doing other things, but now it's spent on this low leverage task. And then if you multiply that by 100 people and years, that starts to be really compelling. And then I also think it's really important to also emphasize that with these tools, there are so many that are out there and there are so many different ways of using them. It's not just ChatGPT. You can experiment with actual on-device models where you have a lot more control over what they may be referencing and what data they may have access to. And you can kind of potentially alleviate some of the concerns that leadership might have around it. And I think one thing that's important about that too is that because there are so many options, the cost to do a small experiment isn't that high. The cost to actually roll something out to an entire organization, that might be higher. Tokens can be kind of pricey. But to actually create a simple proof of concept, most people, most teams, like you may even be able to do that without any code, just using like the OpenAI tools. And you can create something that can maybe demonstrate like, hey, we just took this 5-minute workflow and now it takes 1 minute. And then you can tell the story with that. Show like, well, like what could our team do if they had access to this? Maybe let 3 people use it for a week and see how it works.
Building that kind of proof of concept, does it take a lot of effort? Does it take a lot from a team to be able to do that?
Not necessarily. I know this is how DocsAI started. We had just, one engineer who was really interested in this and really motivated, and then just put it together. And there was no front end to it. It was very simple, very bare bones, but it allowed people and it allowed leaders to really have that aha moment of like, oh, we really could just, ask it a question and then get this accurate answer with, great citations. And there's no human being involved in that and no steps involved in like searching and sifting through things. And so I think that you can really time box it. You can give yourself maybe just 1 day or 2 working days and think about, okay, how do I come into that working day with a well-framed problem, and then just see what's out there and see how quickly I can set it up. I think that if you have a handful of people who are willing to maybe, spend a couple hours outside of their other projects on this, like, I think you can make something really compelling.
We've been talking a lot about how it's worked well and all these sorts of things. Maybe let's talk about what hasn't happened as well as it should have. Are there new capabilities that you need these AI products to be able to come up with soon so that you can fill in whatever gaps?
The number one thing with this is context. One thing that I've noticed over time is that sometimes, like, you come back to these tools and they kind of feel like a friend who never remembers like what you told them the last time the two of you hung out. And you're kind of like, wait, like, you should remember that about me, like, or that I told you that. And so I think, context on two levels. One, on the actual level of the conversation and being able to, in the same way that humans do, get feedback from the body language of the other person and their tone of voice. And then we start to understand, like, what's compelling to them, what's interesting to them. And, being able to, over the course of the conversation, start to shape and frame the output in the most compelling, relevant way possible. And then I also think context over the span of many different conversations and any additional data sources that you want to provide a model, and any additional, like, kind of ways that you have used that output. So for me, if I'm kind of creating like a dream scenario that's very different from today, it would be that I can maybe go into my Notion workspace, and every single day I feel like, oh my gosh, like, Notion knows exactly what I want to write even better than I do. And every single day I notice, oh, it actually took into account that thing that I wrote yesterday, or that file, or that PDF that I uploaded. And it's almost like, not just an intern, but an intern that's learning and growing and becoming more senior in their role too, not just this kind of like forever intern.
And as a designer, you must be trying out a lot of different conversational interfaces. Have you found any that were really exciting to you?
Yeah, I had an awesome experience the other day. I use this personal finance app called Capital, and they use an AI customer service agent called Ada.cx. And it was the first time that I have used a tool like that and actually just come in, had a very conversational experience, and not needed a person to get involved at all. Like, I had a couple questions about my account, and I was kind of like, these are the sort of things it's not going to be an easy answer in a help base. I'm going to talk to the bot, and then I'm going to have to ask the bot for a person. And that just didn't happen. I just asked the questions. It was super conversational. I didn't need to rephrase them a lot. And it just shared exactly what I needed. And then the other thing that I'm excited about too, I recently tried Arc browser, and I love their AI summary of a page. I think that wasn't always perfect for every page that I went on, but I really liked this idea of how do you add this to experiences in a way that's, doing that kind of information sifting on behalf of someone, so they can spend less time and less effort and get more of that experience of like, oh, that's the information I needed.
Thank you so much, Savannah. I'm really looking forward to hearing the full case study on June 4th at the Designing with AI conference.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Today, we are here with Weidan Li, the design research lead at Seek.com. He is going to be talking at the Rosenfeld Designing with AI conference coming up on June 4th and 5th, talking about AI's performance in analyzing qualitative data. Thank you for being here. Before we dive into your case study, can you explain a little bit about why finding more effective ways of analyzing qualitative data should be important to any product team?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, Brittany. That's a great question, and that's also my momentum of initiating this case study. It's been a long time where I think people trying to obtain insights in a faster, better, and cheaper way. And a lot of companies are kind of relying on their insights to make better decisions, either for strategies or businesses or design. The thing is, we know that it's kind of a sweet dream to be fast, cheap, and good. Now with AI tools accessible to most of us, we know that it's almost a given that the tools will make the process faster. Like, you input some transcripts into ChatGPT, and in seconds, it will give you some insights where you need to achieve that goal with researchers in hours or even days. And is it cheaper? Maybe, because once companies decided to subscribing those tools and democratize that across the company, it will be cheaper than hiring another few researchers. But would be the results better? That's the question. If the better or the quality facet of the result get harmed, then I think the cheaper and the faster conditions will be affected as well, because sometimes we will have to restart over to get insights that can be on a certain standard. So that's the main question I want to answer from my case study, and also touch on the question of why finding effective ways of analyzing qualitative data is so important. Effective ways could mean faster, but at the same time, we should guarantee that the quality is on a certain level that makes sure people not get hallucinated by AI and not get inaccurate results from it, and make the right decisions for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your case study? It's titled Qualitative Synthesis with ChatGPT, Better or Worse Than Human Intelligence, which is a great title, by the way. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your case study.
As I mentioned, as a background, I'd like to find out if AI can help us to generate good insights in qualitative data synthesis process. So in this case study, the main approach that I used is about two phases. In the first phase, I did a qualitative synthesis on my own, which is the manual synthesis process. And the data I used for synthesizing is secondary data, which is our past 5 or 6 years of UX reports that our team has generated. So it's actually a big data set. There are surveys, there are interviews, usability testings, etc., and study types were across evaluative, generative, and exploratory study. And then I use the method of thematic analysis and generate thematic networks at the end of the study. And also I generated a framework, which is kind of a very high level storytelling to depict the topic of the synthesis. So for a bit of context, the topic is around trust relationships in the job seeking and hiring market. That's what the company is doing. So as you mentioned, Brittany, in the beginning, I work at Seek.com, and Seek is a digital platform that facilitates job seeking and hiring for the marketplace. And there's a big topic in the company, which is about how one side of the market trusts the other, what kind of information they need to trust each other. The hirers trust the candidates trust the hirers, etc. So my synthesis was on that topic. And I have run through that process of synthesizing the data in the past 5 years of UX research reports and insights. And a few months later, I used that same process in ChatGPT, like basically copy the data to ChatGPT and ask it to analyze it thematically and try to see if they can generate a framework as well. I'm not saying that it should generate a framework that is exactly the same as mine, but at least it should tell a flow of story of how those insights are connected to each other, and have a high level understanding of how the trust relationships flows in this marketplace between candidates, hirer, and Seek.com. But I can tell you the ChatGPT one is like 10 times faster, of course. But in terms of quality, that's probably another section I want to get on later.
To make sure that I understand correctly and to summarize what you said, it sounds like you did the manual synthesis of 5 or 6 years of data, and then you also used the same data to see if you could replicate a similar synthesis using ChatGPT to understand whether or not it would be a comparable alternative to the work
Correct.
that you were doing.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely. Yeah.
And what did you learn when you tried analyzing using ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think the main things around ChatGPT's pros and cons in the qualitative data synthesis. We know that in most cases, in quantitative data synthesis, like maybe people send out survey, then use certain algorithm to analyze the data, and then the results will tell them exactly what it is. Like you can take the numbers away and present. But for qualitative data, there is something in the process which is sense making. Like the answer is not very evident in the data. You have to use your kind of human ability to process the data and get inspired by what you found out, and then generate something new, which is the qualitative insights and even a higher level framework as a storytelling. So for that goal, I think one of the biggest pros of ChatGPT is the thoroughness of summarization. Like whenever I put the original data, or AKA the UX research reports, whether 50 or 100 put into it, it just covered all the corners of the data and not missing anything. And when I was reading the list that gives me in terms of the themes and insights, I was like, wow, I haven't found this in my manual analysis. Because if I keep working on those for hours and hours and days, I can get a little bit tired, or a little bit exhausted with dealing with data. But AI does not feel tiredness. The thing is, it's so good at summarizing, but qualitative synthesis is not only about summarization. It's also about make sense of the data. Like, it's not just we as humans play around with the data, but we need to get onto the higher level of view to see what meanings that we can get out of the data. That's something that I think one of the key things that ChatGPT cannot achieve. So when processing the data myself, I found the relationship is like, remember I said in the marketplace, there's the candidates, which is the job seekers, and the hirers, and the seek digital platforms. It looks like these two sides of the market, the candidates and hirers, are two individuals standing in front of a mirror. And the seek is the mirror itself. And these two individuals can look into the mirror to see their own images or their own reflections in it, and they can see each other's reflections through the mirror. So what does that mean? So all those components are reflecting what I found out from the insights. Is like, people are trying to trust each other because it's a digital platform. Before you find a job or before you hire someone, you don't know who that is. So you rely on this mirror or this digital platform to see who that individual is and to see if you trust them. But at the same time, they look into the mirror and see their own image, which is like, am I trustworthy person, or am I a trustworthy company in the other side of the market views? Because they want to have a good reputation of being trusted in the market. So that's a brighter future for either companies hiring good talents, or a bright future for the individuals to find a good job. So that's why the mirror is super important to facilitate that trust relationships. However, I didn't force that analogy in the framework to happen after gaining the insights. It's just slightly present itself to me in the process of synthesizing the qualitative data. This is something that ChatGPT cannot do, because I prompted it to give me an analogy in an overarching way to describe its insights. It was, I wouldn't say it's wrong. There's nothing wrong with analogy. Like, I don't care what it compared it to, but it was just a bit messy and very much inaccurate. So for the first several trials, it just gives me a lot of dancing analogy. Again, I don't hate dancing, although I can't do it, but it's just talking about one side of the market is one of the dancer, the other is another dancer who's dancing together, kind of thing. It's just like the connections between analogy and the insights are so far-fetched and unnatural. That's not the original intention of using analogy, because actually ChatGPT used analogy to make the storytelling even more complicated for people to understand. My intention in my manual synthesis is use a simple story to carry on the insights and communicate with people easier. I'm thinking I wish AI could achieve in the future is not only summarizing the data, but also bring me onto a stage where I feel the intellectual leap. This is not something that, as far as I can see from this study, as an example, that ChatGPT cannot do. But there are also other cons from AIs. For example, in my thematic analysis, I generate basic themes first as the lowest level of theme, and then I keep grouping those basic themes into organizing themes, which is kind of a higher level and the more abstract concept, and then keep grouping those organizing themes to the global themes. So there should be a contrast of granularity of the themes, one step after the other. That's something that ChatGPT cannot do very well, because some of the organizing themes that GPT generated is on the same detailed level as the basic themes.
It sounds like one of the biggest challenges that we're facing as researchers and utilizing some of these tools is that they're great as assistants. They're great as, working alongside you to point you in certain directions, but going beyond that, building those, those deeper themes and building those stories around the data. It sounds like that's still an area where it's not going to succeed, at least in what exists today.
Absolutely.
And if we flip it to the other side and look at, okay, well, what is it good for? We just mentioned a couple of those things about just, that first pass of analysis, maybe the second pass at getting a little deeper. But is there anything else that you found specifically are tasks that you would recommend using generative AI for?
Yeah, I think that's also many people are wondering at the moment. Even including my company, designers are trying to use AI to speed up their work because they do research themselves. One thing that I suggest people to do is do not take AI's answer as a conclusion. We use that as stimulus or as a trigger. And we can either use that trigger for new ideas that we generate ourselves, like use that as a basis, or we can use AI's answer and then we interpret why it gives us the answer like that. Or is there anything else that I need to explore? If we only take AI's answer as a conclusion, then a lot of the insights are eventually just going to be summaries. It's like facts. There doesn't involve that aha moment or inspirations from the insights. What's the biggest meanings of doing these interviews across the participants or running this survey? So I think one of the biggest thing or very useful way of using AI is use it as an assistant for us to either calculating or summarizing. Again, summarizing is so different than synthesis. So for example, we can, after interviews, I suppose we have some notes or, have jot down our observations in the session. And then we probably can input the transcripts into ChatGPT and see what kind of summaries they can generate from it. But we definitely cannot take it as insights. We use it as another way of validate what we have observed. That's related to what I mentioned. It's so thorough, it's so comprehensive. It doesn't miss anything. So it's such a thorough list of summarizations that you can have from the session, and then you validate your own observation against ChatGPT's answer and see if you have missed anything. There could be other ways, like we can use it more quantitatively in a qualitative study. For example, we can do some quantitative content analysis. If you are talking about, I don't know, research topic around stress or anxiety or concerns, and then we can have a list of words that we want to explore, like to see how strong the pattern is when people get onto those emotions or vibes. And then we probably can use ChatGPT to calculate, how many times or what the frequency is that certain words appear in the transcripts. That will save like 10 times of the time that we spend of doing it. So I think we use it to summarize, we use it to calculate, we use it to validate, but eventually it still has to go back to our own interpretation, our own human viewpoint, where we immerse ourselves in the data and to see, did I miss anything?
One of the fears that I hear frequently about using AI, especially for research, is this idea of like things being summarized to an average or normalized, right? And that's important when it comes to data. But one of the joys and benefits of qualitative research really comes down to finding those outliers and understanding why that's the case.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the untapped benefits of AI that I really have not seen very often being talked about or being promoted in these products, except for in legal cases, is also being able to look at, well, what's missing? Like what is only being mentioned a couple of times that could be of interest? Have you seen in the work that you're doing?
Yes, I think that's where one of the key insights, which is the role of human curiosity plays in research, particularly qualitative research. But the main difference between AI, one of the main difference between AI and humans is humans can be curious. Great evidence for the companies to make decisions are not always within what we already know, right? Has to be driven by our curiosity one step at a time. Like it probably leads us to here and then we found something new.
Yesterday, May 13th,
OpenAI just did a big announcement. They're launching ChatGPT 4.0. What are you most excited about for how this can make your work stronger?
In the future, when it evolves, probably it can understand us better in terms of, let's say, the scenario of, okay, I have a usability testing, not results, but the transcripts. Compared to the current version, it just understands more about my company context or my goal from the study. The new AI tools will give us more accurate summarizations and faster results. But I think at the moment, we cannot see that it will replace human intellectuals, particularly in generating the new insights and knowledge in qualitative studies.
Which tools that exist right now or that are coming up are you excited by, other than ChatGPT?
So I've been using a few software which have incorporated AI capabilities such as Dovetail and Mirror. Some of their functionalities are quite similar to facilitate qualitative studies. For example, Dovetail have the quick summarization on your interview transcripts. Yeah, I had a look. It's quite good. It just concludes the demographic information of that particular participant. What do they do? Where do they live? What their habits are based on what it said. And Miro, of course, you can do like the sentiment analysis. It's been there for a long time. I think Dovetail can do that as well. Again, but one thing that I told my colleagues is don't take their analysis results as your answer. One thing I'm so scared of is they did analysis and then they get the summaries and then they directly copy those summaries to reports. That's definitely not what we want. You still need your interpretation to explore why these summarizations are like this. The other tool actually is interesting that I've been using myself is not a research tool. It's Descript, which is a video editing tool. It's around how well we can communicate insights. Let's say we collaborate with AI. We got their summarizations, we validate with our own findings, we generate great insights. But how are we going to communicate that to our stakeholders? So the thing is, how can we communicate insights with a good storytelling? Storytelling is abstract, of course, but my personal suggestion is try different formats of reporting your insights.
What a wonderful way to kind of wrap us up in full circle of this idea of storytelling and how we can't rely on these tools to do the storytelling for us, but we can really rely on them to allow us to tell those stories much faster and build those business cases and get internal buy-in and support in how to move those insights further.
Exactly.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you've shared today. It's been great. And I'm so excited to hear your case study presentation at the Designing for AI conference. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Design of AI podcast. The show is hosted by Brittany Hobbs and Arpi Drag Figueredo. Subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple to get our latest episodes. We speak to leaders at the forefront of AI to learn how great AI products are designed and how they're transforming industries. To contact us, visit our website, designof.ai.